My name's Bennoui. I lead up developer relations at DataRobot. Tonight, what I really wanted to talk about is what it takes to get an agent in production. And when I say get an agent in production, I mean an agent that other people can use, that's returning value back to the company, and that you can iterate on and improve. First question, how many of you have built an agent in the past couple of months? Oh, that's a good show of hands. That's awesome. And how many of you have deployed a production agent that other people are using, that is saving your company money, that is maybe saving hours on a job, but basically it's broadly accessible? Another show of hands. Okay, cool. So there was a delta. There were more hands on the first question. That's okay. We'll work on that together. But the reality is the gap between those two answers can be pretty big. And so what's interesting is that gap is not where we hear a lot of the noise, right? Every week, you see that the new model was released. And to be quite honest, the models are advancing pretty quickly and the benchmarks are starting to really coalesce and look very similar. So the models are not the problem there. The models work in the demo, they typically work in production. So that's not the problematic layer. It's also not the framework. And there's a lot of frameworks. Like, that's going to get you a demo. That's great. That's also not the problem in production. And the last one, and this is my hot take of tonight, it's also not the prompt. Prompt engineering was a really big thing. I saw a lot of things on X of people being like, oh, you got to do this with your system prompts and blah, blah, blah. But that's also not the problem, because the models are getting really, really smart. And because of that, they're getting even more forgiving of what you're building. Those three things, they tend to be above the waterline. We're going to go deep diving today about what's below it. But before I jump in, I want to paint a picture. So I work with a lot of devs. They go across different teams, but agent building isn't just developers. It's also finance. I see teams, finance teams building agents. They're using a ton of different tools. They're using tools, again, that I've never heard of because they're super finance specific. They're building on their own laptop, and that's great. And when I zoom out and look even more, I start to see other patterns, right? Other teams have other jobs to be done. My friends in marketing are building agents. They might be doing things like generating images for blogs or doing things like outbound and like nurture campaigns. So very different, but one pattern holds, right? If you look in the top right corner, what you see is you see teams building, you see a lot of agents in flight, but you see a funnel, and it starts to drop off on the visibility side and also the production side. It's not just two teams or two departments or a part of the company. It's actually the whole company. It's chaos. So everybody has their own tools. Everybody has something on their own laptop, and it's all over the place. And what you see here is the big picture, right? You're multiplying across different departments. You have tons of teams. You have tons of things in flight, but things kind of funnel off. And so what that visualization is what low ROI looks like, return on investment. Unpredictability for costs, because now you not only have a ton of tools, but you have a ton of different models that you're using. You have a ton of different pieces of your infra. And that translates to things like risk and hard security and really hard push to production as a result of that. So yeah, we're going to talk about that today. And hopefully everyone here can leave and go, I have the toolkit for getting my agent to production. But this is a visual reason why it's hard. And so this is very unintimidating, and in fact, it looks very similar to your traditional tool stack as a developer, right? You have to have good data, so you have to do data prep. You have to be able to build and deploy things, because otherwise it's just going to stay on your computer. And then the last three is you need to have observability, security, and governance. Those are the hardest parts, and they usually sit on the bottom. Now, that last slide made it look really simple. When I got to the next slide, now you saw like 3 to 6 categories across each of the layers. I worked with a team that was stitching about 15 of these tools together. And the point I want to make is you may not be using a lot of tools today, and that's okay. But something to know is that as you use more of these, as there are more seams, there are more things that have an opportunity to break. The other thing is it's more around how you take those categories and you merge them together and you consolidate as much as possible. And this is a story I've told a ton on the digital transformation side, on the security side. You want to consolidate. You don't want to have tons of these things together. Now, the thing that I want you all to notice is that tools and frameworks is a single box, but it is a big problem in the build phase because basically that is the important part of how an agent is doing its discoverability, its calling, its validation, its retries, and it spans many other boxes. It spans evals, it spans observability, it spans auth and error handling. And so that's why when I talk to a lot of these teams that are like, I'm using this and I'm using that, I'm like, that's cool. That's a really cool tool library, but your agent's still hallucinating in production. All that to say is just like tech debt, a lot of those things that I said before, people like to talk about the tools, but they don't talk about the hard parts, the mechanism around it all. When I talk to people that are like, I built an agent and it works and it's 65% accurate, they're really proud because it works on their computer, it runs on the dummy data, it impresses people when you demo it, and it gets the budget approved. Someone's like, go ship it, we'll put it on the roadmap, this is great. But then the production reality hits, and that is the 95%, which is the really hard part, right? It's the trick. You think that it's just 30% and it's a small amount of work, but it's the most amount of work because that's the real data, the real scale, the real cost, and also the security team is like, what are you doing? We need to do the deep security review of this. So a lot of the effort goes into that 30%, but that's the percent that you're actually not demoing. So you get surprised by it because you're like, what do you mean? I have this agent, it works, it does all the logic properly, but now I have to go do security for it? Like, what? I don't know what this governance thing that I have to do is. And so that creates a lot of friction. So what's in it? And we're going to go into that today. So it's 3 parts. The first part is it's the developer experience and the enterprise readiness. Above the waterline, it's model, framework, prompt. Those are the 65%. When you think about the 30%, it's the DevX, the agent identity and authorization, and the token factory economics. I know we all like to talk about token maxing. Now let's talk about the economics behind that. And so we'll go into each. The first thing I want to cover is the DevX pillar, right? And when you think DevX, there's 2 lanes. One is continuous improvement, and the other one is the enterprise integration, and they live on different parts of the software development pipeline. So on the continuous improvement side, you have the first one, trace analysis and remediation. It means that you can see what's failing in your agent, and you can also fix it without breaking everything while you fix it. The second part is the A and B testing. So when you're building an agent, you have to actually see what changing the system prompt and changing the model does, but measure it empirically, right? I see a lot of folks go, oh, this new model came out, or I'm going to change a system prompt like this, and they change it on vibes, but they cannot answer to me what exactly they changed in the agent performance itself. The third is the regression detection. So I hear a lot like, hey, I deployed this agent in production. My customer started having problems because it was a doc spot and it wasn't answering questions properly. What do I do? And it's doing that regression detection so that you catch it before your customers do. And the last one is cost management, and I'll get into that too, but I will say it's not just tokens, it's also compute and memory, it's infra. People forget, they over-index on the model side. The right side is talking about more CI/CD and how you promote agents. I see a lot of agents get treated like they're this crazy foreign thing, so they YOLO ship things to prod, and then they go, what? I didn't realize that this doesn't have any security at all. So it's still promoting agents the same way you promote things through your dev environment, your staging environment, your production environment, and designing a system around that so that your agents work the same way. And then, of course, there's observability, more observability, so being able to look at things locally and how they go to prod, and then OAuth and connecting data to real production data so that you not only do it one time, but it's robust and it stays connected and it authenticates properly. But none of this is actually building the actual agent, right? Because everything's already boxed up in that 65%. It is all required for production, and teams that I see that do it well, they either over-index on either just building it or buying it. So how do you solve this? Well, there is a couple different things, but one thing I will say is even in R&D, there's tons of different teams, and they never want to solve things universally. They want to do things one way. I'm here to tell you it is okay to do the legwork and spend time finding one platform. So let me talk about what that looks like. First principle. Augmenting instead of rewriting. Take the agent code that already works and lift it and shift it into a platform that can just automatically plug in everything so that you don't need to build the trace analysis yourself. You don't need to figure out how to do A and B testing. You don't need to figure out how to get your GRC team to have visibility into what you've built. So having a platform that already does that lets you also borrow from what other people are building into their agents, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. The second one, you want to have one pattern for every agent. I see a lot of companies that have tons of agents, and every agent's using a different auth provider, a different logging tool, a different way to do their error handling, and a different way to promote their agents to production. That's a tax that you keep paying over and over again when you could just focus on the innovation side. And the last one is over-indexing on how long it takes to get something enterprise ready. So I talk to companies and they're like, it's going to take me 6 months to build this agent. I'm like, why? Like, you've picked the right platform for this to land in. You can actually do this in a couple of days. You reuse scaffolding, you reuse a lot of good patterns, and you could get all the hard parts done for you and just focus on the exciting side. You also have to think about things like identity. So I touch upon auth, and it's easy to conflate auth with DevX, but it's also its own column. One thing I see a lot of people building agents and treating it like it's an API. They give it a broadly scoped key, broadly scoped access, and one day they find out that that thing owned the entire kingdom and went and deleted the production database or all of the service tickets, and it was completely unavoidable by the way they did it, but avoidable if you thought about how you scope things. Now, the other thing to think about is being able to distinguish action. So a lot of times a user builds something, they give it scope, and then the agent goes and acts on that user's behalf, and then it's really hard to see if that was the person that did it or if it was the agent that did it. And then you get into really hairy situations when something goes awry. The last one is around authorization and treating it like it's binary. So a lot of things determine whether an agent can hit a system or it can't. I would say that thinking about the intersection of how user privileges and scopes work, you have to really think about what that thing should be doing, right? An agent isn't just doing one job. Sometimes it's daisy chaining jobs, and that can be invisible. So really thinking about what the identity and permissioning model looks like. It's a different model. There's a couple things that you can think about, and I'm going to hit on the highlights. The first one is treating an agent like it's a first-class identity, so giving it a real OAuth identity in your directory and not an API key. Please stop giving agents API keys. What that does is it makes it routable, it makes it governable, and most importantly, it makes it revocable when things start to go bad. So you don't need to trace it down or track it down when things go bad. You have a centralized place where it's managed. The other point is looking at using your existing providers to do this. So your Oktas, your Entras of the world, whatever native auth you're using, seeing if you can apply that architecture to your agent. And the last one is audit logs. Boring, but very useful. Being able to have a tamper-proof trail of what the agent is doing, what decisions it made, the explainability. And when you do this, if you find the right platform, you don't have to do it from scratch. You could use your existing investments, and it's really easy to integrate it and reuse and recycle. Now, my last pillar is around tokening. And I am an anti-token maxer because I believe in cost savings because I've seen it go bad. So the most important thing that I want to call out is when people build agents, they tie it to a single GPU. They tie it to a single piece of infrastructure, and they don't think about what is going to happen at scale, both from a cost side and the scalability side. So the first thing you get there is you get unpredictable costs. So you get consumption that swings based off of the model you put into it, based off of the retries, based off of when the agent starts going in a crazy loop. And then when you have that talk with finance, it's really awkward because they're like, we don't know how to price this. There is no trend here. The second is the scale. So a lot of people, they focus on building this thing for a single GPU, like to run on a single GPU, and they don't think about what's going to happen when we need to scale this thing. That ends up being, oh, I need a SRE or a DevOps person to help me understand this, and you have to hope that they're really good on the GPU economic side. And so you get things like failures and bad auto-scaling and lack of availability, which we're seeing with a lot of the hyperscalers. The last is the SLA tiering, or not having price tied to it. So everything pays a premium. So my agent that I built for fun to do social media trend tracking gets treated the same way and charges the same way as the agent that's used for customer support. My thing should not be on the corporate bill, but they don't know any better yet. This borrows a pattern that I've seen from a lot of cloud providers where you start to think about things like token pools, where you do things similar to what you've seen in containerized environments by doing admission control and looking at traffic flows and ways to control and throttle what's going on. You give that agent a contract and everything else works like magic. The second one is talking about how you do tiering. So there's premium compute and then there's spot tiers. So things that are tied to an SLA that customers or people at the company rely on need to live on those premium instances. Everything else can get demoted, right? Things that don't have big latency promises around them, things that are super discounted, things that really might not be optimized, but because they're test agents, you don't really need to worry about them too much. They don't need to run all the time. It's okay. And the last one is decoupling the user contract from backend execution. So things like GPUs change, topology changes, and even where the workload can run can change. So it can move from cloud provider to cloud provider, from cloud provider to on-prem. So being prepared for that. All this to say is you really want to optimize on getting the best infra and thinking about scale for the things that are mission critical and labeling and having an inventory of what's not and working with your SRE team to really find out where those things need to live and optimizing for that. And that way, basically things stay stable and you have a contract and you know exactly what needs to run to a certain degree and what can move around. So all this to summarize, there's 3 pillars. DevX, so thinking about hooks and augmenting and keeping a standard for your auth and your logging and your CI/CD. Agent identity, so treating agents like they're employees, not APIs. They need to be able to kind of spread their wings and make decisions and be able to decide on their own when to take an action, but you also need to be able to revoke it when it starts to go bad. And the last one is the anti-token maxing statement, where it's thinking about token economics. So not just going crazy and using the most expensive instance, but actually thinking about what you're building now and how it needs to scale. 3 things that I will share, and some of these are open source. So first one, I like gateways a lot. I'm a big gateway fan. So there's tons of projects out there. I don't need to name any specific ones, but these are great because you can have a data plane for your LLMs and your MCPs and how you do traffic and routing. Built to runtime security. A year or 2 ago now, we didn't have good answers. Now we have things all the way from the I don't know what the system is going to be made out of side, so the component side, all the way to the runtime side. And there's tons of amazing projects. I really like AARM, the ARM project, because that lets you put your policies and control how your agent behaves. And then thinking about things as CI, and most importantly, evals. So if something fails or regresses, treating it like a failing test and not promoting it, and being able to test that over time and monitor it over time. At DataRobot, we also work on a lot of open source. We have a couple projects. We have a new one coming out soon called Tensile. And these things can help across the journey. Really start thinking about above and below the waterline. And I think a lot of things start to fall into place based off of that. Thank you.